I'm going to turn off my camera, but I'll be here.
That's fine. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So welcome to cohort 24 marketing sprint session 3. Yes, 3, I believe. Today we are going to cover content from the workbook that is marked as session 2 and session 3. So what we're going to talk about today is audience engagement and why it's important, and the means by which we see the most response from an audience when it comes to engaging with them and then asking for their engagement perhaps in return. So we're going to really talk a lot about how to cultivate and foster one-on-one communications and relationships with even a large amount of perhaps, let's say, LinkedIn connections or followers, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and a little bit about the transitioning of the publishing industry and what that looks like, and maybe give a little bit of background as to the why we advocate this approach. We'll talk about the difference between superfans, fans, backers. There's going to be some activities through which you can perhaps think about audience engagement. Maybe there's particular individuals or groups through which, hello, Nikki, welcome, through which you can start to foster this audience engagement. There's tools for fan interactions, and the goal of all of these interactions really is to start to facilitate people to become backers, and then maybe take those backers and turn them into fans, and take some of those fans and equip them to really be advocates on your behalf, which would then perhaps make them into super fans. We're going to kind of talk about what that looks like and what we know most audience members need to perhaps shift from a backer to a fan to a super fan. We're then going to talk about Session 3 material, which talks about identifying your author persona and really how to engage in that process, how to begin that process, what we would like you to have at the end of that. And that even leads a little bit into crafting your book announcement and where, once again, where to get kicked off on that, what to include, where perhaps to focus those announcements, digitally, online. The goal really to these 2 sessions and really what we're going to talk about today is audience building engagement, engagement that really we see increases perhaps not just followers, but increases the dedication and the advocacy of audiences really is based on personal communication, personal follow-up. So how do we do that? And that's really what we're going to talk about today. Are there any questions first and foremost from our last session? Our last session focused a lot on social media. Any questions on that? Brendan's shaking his head. Nikki, if we don't hear you speak up, we'll assume that you're okay with that also.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you so much. I know you had a lot of really good feedback and input during our social media session last week. So likewise, if there's anything, that we discussed today that either Brendan or Nikki, you guys would have questions about or would have some feedback or input on or experience with, by all means, this is a forum where it's, we can share that because the idea is that not only are we talking about marketing, but you guys as authors are creating a community here through which you can kind of bounce ideas off of each other. So yes, by all means, if there's anything you guys would want to ask about or talk about, please do let me know. I'm going to real quick share and let's jump into the workbook. We are going to kick off with the material that is listed under session 2. So audience engagement, this is where we're going to start. So first and foremost, a lot of the disconnect between what people think the approach should look like to a successful book publishing versus what it actually takes for a successful book publishing, is the fact that there are a lot of kind of the older way of thinking where people assume that success for a book publication and book sales really happens by the number of shoppers that are in a bookstore, how many bookstores you're in and perhaps you get to speak at, the reviews that come in on your book, paid advertising. And while all of that in some capacity could play a part, what modern authors today know to be true is that book sales truly happen and are generated through personal connections and word of mouth recommendations that build that one-on-one relationship with your audience. And that's a lot of why I talk about creating advocates in your audience. Those are the people who are going to go out and give you that positive word of mouth and talk to others about you or about your work or about your topic or about your approach or about your journey. And they're going to kind of drum up some interest or maybe drum up new audience members or perhaps new, groups that you can associate with. But they do that through word of mouth and they're doing it on your behalf. And a lot of the times that is organic. There is no money behind that. A lot of times it's simply a personal connection that is made that the audience member feels like, man, I want other people to know about this. And then they go out and do that on your behalf. And that's really what we like to, in all capacities of marketing, that's what we like to shoot for, is really having a personal enough connection with our audience that we equip them with the information, with the experience that they need to then go out and do that on our behalf. So where I think nowadays, especially with the advent of social media, where we see that disconnect occur a lot is when authors think this is my book, because then the book does become the focus. We want there to be, once again, that invitation marketing where we're inviting people into our process, inviting people into our journey, and we're building a community, and it is now our book. And your community shares, they feel like vested interest in either you or your topic or the actual book itself. But it's this idea of it's our work. It's what we've done together. Because, I would say I, as the author, couldn't have done this without you guys, going out there and drumming up interest and being yourself interested. And, so that's really what a lot of modern authors are seeing. Their success stems from this concept shift from this is my book, this is my baby, this is my work, to this is our, this is it to raise a child and your book is your baby. So we want to invite the village in. And we want how much we appreciate their contribution, time, and whatnot. So that's where we really want to see the shift, is thinking this is my book to this is all ours. We've shared in this together, and you guys have been on this journey with me. And we want there to be this kind of collective feeling about it. The publishing industry is in a major transition. Obviously, digital audiobooks, Amazon, all of that, social media. It's landscape. And 81% of people have writing a book on their bucket list, right? It's a great thing to aspire to do. However, I think 2% of that 81%, less than actually are able to go out and write the book and publish it. 20% of traditionally published authors, in fact, less than, earn out their advance, which means they receive royalties from the sales of their book. Whereas 50% of self-published authors had more than $500 in sales for their book. And you're not, at that point, if you own your work, you're not depending on simple royalties, right? You're seeing far more of a return on each individual package sale or each individual book sale than someone who is doing that through royalties. You own your work, you own your ideas, you own your concepts, which in this day and age is a revolutionary thing to give to people. When you now have the ability to truly own these ideas that came from your head, your heart, your mind, your soul. And that's something that I think we see far more value in than, selling a book and simply making money. To what do successful authors do to avoid pitfalls and launch a successful book? And this is really what we're focusing on in today's session. So we want you to build direct relationships with readers and audience members. You want to focus on creating an engaged community first. And I even hate to use the word sell second here, because the idea is that if we've cultivated enough of a personal feeling with our community, that it doesn't feel like a sell when we ask them to support us, particularly monetarily. It's an organic part, and it feels far more natural in a conversation where there's been a rapport built and there's been more of a personal connection or communication happening. Then it just feels like a kind of a natural part of the conversation, rather than, a used car salesman popping up on your TV and saying, we got cars, you need this car because X, Y, and Z. You shouldn't have to tell people why they need to support you if it's coming at a point in the conversation when kind of you've already flushed out that you're creating something, and flushed out that, okay, welcome. It's good to see you. We would want it to feel more organic. That way you feel more comfortable doing it. And that way your audience also feels more comfortable of that ask. They have and use templates to help them promote effectively. These are, templates, email templates, anything that you're going to use to communicate with your audience. That's what we're talking about, templates. But we also don't want that to be a hard and fast, I have to do what the template says, the way can make this personal. That, we also would advocate for balancing between templated and personalized. They're supported by a group of fellow authors, which is exactly what we really are trying to cultivate here in a lot of these sprint sessions. Is we want you to also feel that this is your community and that you guys are all going through this at the same time. We want you to be able to lean on each other and talk about the difficulties and talk about the successes and celebrate them. They have editing, coaching, and marketing support much earlier in the process than an author who perhaps focuses on the book and then, oh yeah, book is done, then I'll begin that thinking about that stuff. The fact of the matter is, it's all tied in together. It all builds off of each other. Don't want to think of marketing and editing, and coaching around book publication or around, what we're trying to accomplish. We want to think of that those are items that build off of what we're creating at the same time. So we see authors that do have successful pre-sales and launches, we see them think about those things way earlier in the process, so that perhaps what you want to do in marketing can inform what you're doing with your manuscript. And we want to think of that end goal also first, and then we can kind of backtrack and think, well, how do I get there? What do I need to do? And at what point do I perhaps need to do that? They focus on pre-selling their first 200 copies of their books. They have event-driven book launches, and they have dates and targets planned in advance. And that's one thing with marketing. We are always trying to think if we have a webinar in the second quarter of our year, we are going to start planning out and perhaps even building content and generating interest in our webinar in 3-4 months prior to that. Because then we can actually start to kind of build a more committed audience that is actually going to show up when there's a call to action placed to them, because we've invited them into the process and not just invited them into the webinar. We've invited them into, hey, we got our speakers. We've invited them into, hey, what questions do you have? We've got this webinar coming up. Tell us what you'd like to hear about. So the community, the audience, feels as though they're informing that end product, that webinar, or informing the end product of the book. And there's that invitation where you're pulling them into the process, and it is now not just my book, your book, it's ours. It's our project. Relationships are everything. And this is where we start to really talk about, well, what do we need from an individual to consider them a part of my audience? Anyone who contributes one of the 3 T's is someone who we would consider a member of your audience. Time. Are they connecting with you? Are they sharing your posts perhaps on their account or on their platforms? Are they taking time to support you? Is there anything that they're doing, even if it's just leaving a comment on your post? Are they taking time, even if it's moments of their day, mere moments? Are they taking time to support you in some way? If yes, then yeah, we want to consider them an audience member. Time is valuable. Are they contributing talent? Are they supporting you in a way that's unique to them, i.e., are you going on their podcast? Are they going to write an article or feature you in one of their blog posts? Are they pre-ordering your book, perhaps, or many, 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 many copies of your book for their particular organization's next conference? That's talent. They're exchanging that with you, and they're giving that. They're supporting you in a unique way that is more talent-based to show you, that support. So yes, we would want to consider them also a valuable member of our audience. Treasure. If they can't give time or talent, are they supporting you monetarily? So those are the 3 kind of asks. Whenever we see one of those 3 things from a particular individual or an organization, that's when we say, okay, you are a part of my audience. So even people that have come into this manuscripts process with very large social media followings, we would say, well, that's great, but how many of these people have contributed time, talent, or treasure to you? And a lot of the times, even with big social media followings, perhaps even more with big social media followings, we need that personalized communication and connection. Because if you present an ask to your community, oh, I'm going to ask all of my 100,000 followers to go purchase a copy of my book or to purchase one of my packages. If those audience members don't feel you're speaking specifically to them and that call to action is there for them, they're going to expect that the other 999,000 followers are going to support you in that way, and they're not going to. So that very personal connection, that very personal ask needs to exist even with large followings. And typically with large followings, we would say, well, choose the 100 people that are most likely or already have contributed time, talent, treasure. That's your main audience. That's who you want to focus on. These are our 3 main types of audience members. And if anyone is familiar with the marketing funnel or the concept of the marketing funnel, this is kind of a very abbreviated type of funnel. So the idea with the marketing funnel is that you have this funnel, right? This triangle. And at the bottom is the fewest number of people, but it's kind of the people who we definitely think are either going to purchase or who are going to complete the call to action, buy the product, buy the service. And granted, it's a smaller amount of people, but we are pretty sure at that point that they're going to matriculate through the funnel entirely and then purchase of some kind. Whereas at the top of the funnel, there's a lot more people. It's a lot bigger. However, there's this middle part where each of these parts of the funnel need particular information and typically particular types of content to shift from being at the top to being in the middle to then being at that bottom where we're pretty sure they're going to make a purchase. And this is kind of the same concept. But it would go the opposite way of the way it's written in the workbook. So at the top, we have our backers. They're invested in you, right? These are friends. These are family. They're not necessarily perhaps invested in your topic or your genre, but they are interested, in seeing you succeed, right? You typically have to have meaningful one-on-one interactions and create interesting content to facilitate these people from being backers to being fans. And the fans are kind of that middle part of the funnel. They're invested in your topic. So these are people who perhaps they're not invested in you specifically as the author, but your topic is meaningful to them in some capacity. A lot of times we see this being colleagues or a particular maybe, genre, people who really have an interest in a genre, a fantasy, or people who are in a similar industry as you, and would somehow be interested in what it is you're talking about. Once again, we want to have meaningful connections with these fans, because the idea is then to take them to the bottom of the funnel, which is where our super fans live. And these are people who really are probably going to buy anything you do, right? They're going to buy your book, attend your webinar, share your content on social media. They're invested both in you and in your topic and genre. So obviously, I think just by those definitions, there's probably people that you're already thinking of that you're like, oh, I would place them here. I would put them, here. But the idea is that if we present the right content at the right time and target the right type of people, the right type of audience members, that we can move them perhaps through that funnel from being a backer to perhaps being a super fan. And that takes a particular type of content, but regardless of the type of content, it does take personalized messaging, and it does take one-on-one, communications at some point. And then we do have an activity here for you where you kind of look at your current social media activity, and analyze it briefly. And we're not looking at the history of your social media activity. We're really looking at the last 30 days. And we're taking an inventory on our audience where we look at the messaging platforms that we've used. We look at our social media platforms, our email platforms. And real quick, there is a term in here that I always like to identify: unique people. When we ask you to look at your direct messages, yes, we want to see how many direct messages you've had in the last 30 days. But what we're more interested in finding out is the number of unique conversations you've had. And the difference between a regular, we want your direct message activity versus we want to know your unique, the unique accounts that you've touched. What that means is an account that has direct messaged you more than once, we wouldn't count every single one of those messages. We would count one. Their account is the one that messaged all of these messages. They are one unique user. So even if there are entities or individuals who are messaging with you, maybe via email multiple times, we would still count that as one unique account. So it's every account that engages with you, regardless of the number of messages that you may exchange with them, they are one unique account. So when you're going through these activities in the workbook and really trying to get those numbers in this particular activity, we're looking at the number of unique. So we want the number of accounts that you've touched base with, regardless of how many messages you've exchanged with them. Each of one of those accounts is going to account for one unique person or account that you've spoken to. So all of this you would go through and look at those last 30 days activities, and then get that information into this. And we're going to also look at organizations or groups that you are a member of, or that you perhaps could be a member of. Are you an alum of a particular university or multiple universities, jobs, companies, organizations you've engaged with that you've been a member of? And we also then want to look at organizations that maybe you're not a current member of, but maybe have alignment to your book, topic, life, something in some capacity that relates to you. And then we can actually, after we go through this kind of very brief assessment of our activity, we may be able to pinpoint some places where we haven't perhaps focused effort that we could, in order to generate more of those backers, fans, and super fans. Here, and then of course, we always include the audience engagement tracker, which is a very basic spreadsheet for you to kind of keep track of these either unique accounts or individuals that you are that you're considering your super fans. And then here's, once again, activity that we would like you to engage with them. And I'll kind of describe what each of these mean in further. But once again, that template is a great place to go if there's, well, how do I keep track of who I'm talking to? How do I keep track of who I think is a super fan or who I know is a super fan? This is the template that we would like you to kind of use to keep track of that. And it's important to keep track of it. It's data. It's going to tell you where your efforts are best spent and where your time is best spent. And we want you to know that. So we want you to collect that data so that there may be some really big things that stick out when we do this kind of brief assessment of our current platforms. There may be something that stands out that it's like, wow, I didn't think this would, this particular person was as supportive, but I'm now noticing, these trends, or maybe I should put more effort into this area because it would be very valuable for me to, it would be easy to get people to be super fans, for that particular organization. So after we do kind of our first step, which is the audience inventory and our, our own kind of social media or digital activity assessment, we then move into audience engagement. The idea is that we want you to engage far before you have anything to sell. We want to help first and present ourselves as a valuable member of their community, and we want to engage with them first on just a very human level. Oh man, I loved your article that you wrote. I love what you're saying here. And we want to do that because, once again, organically, it's a lot easier to ask someone for something at some point if we've presented ourselves as value to them first. If we're doing this goodwill first, then there's that unspoken, oh, well, this person pulled my garbage cans in on a windy day, so I'm going to do that in return for them. So the idea is that we kind of use that psychology and that concept also in this process, where we want to validate others. We want to present value to others. We want to, kind of give positively to others first, so that when we do have an ask and we do have a call to action that perhaps may be a purchase, it feels more natural and it doesn't feel as forced or as salesy. So this is kind of what we would say the steps to engaging personally. And once again, even with big social media followings, choose the top 100 accounts that you feel would actually be of value to you and would make a purchase, either a package or, or in some capacity would perhaps be better suited to be someone who would, want to purchase at some point. But engage digitally and engage personally. Look at each individual that is in your following, engage with their content or message with them first. And like I said, it could be something even as simple as a comment. I love what you said here. Maybe put a specific sentence from the article. That way they know, like, oh man, this person really read it. And they're engaged with my stuff, so I should engage with theirs in return. Comment on recent posts, updates, and then follow up with a direct message, right? Not all conversation needs to happen within the comments. If someone comments on your work, or let's say you comment on someone else's first, which is obviously what we would recommend, and they like your comment or they respond, then you can send them a direct message where you do begin to kind of establish that one-on-one communication. It can even be something as simple as, maybe it's someone you spoke with in the past. I've realized it's been a while since we talked, and I just wanted to check in to see if you're still with a particular organization, or you're still, an accountant, or, it doesn't have to be super personal about their personal life. It just needs to be personal in the sense that they feel you are talking directly to them, right? This one-on-one communication is really what I mean when I say we need it to be personalized. Schedule and in-person, phone, Zoom, but just a regular conversation with people that are in your life, and share something about your book far in advance to you needing early reviews or anything like that. Just talk about, the synopsis of what it is your book will be about. Give a sample, maybe the author's note that's going to be in the book, share that ahead of time. Interviews that you're going to be doing. And the idea is that you guys are generating a lot of content writing these books. So you don't need to reinvent the wheel. Share what it is you're creating. Share, if you've written author's note, share that. Hey guys, guess what? I'm so proud of myself. I finished, my author's note today. Here it is. Tell me what your thoughts are. We want to kind of, bait the hook and give a little bit of a peek behind the curtain to people. Granted, you don't want to put your whole book, on your LinkedIn account or anything. But once again, share quotes, share successes that you're having. If there's something that you finished that you are really proud of, share some of that. Let them peek behind the curtain ever so slightly, because that does feel far more personal than no talk, no peek behind the curtain, no quotes, no nothing. And then all of a sudden, hey, buy this book. That's, people may say, well, I don't really know, I'm not really sure I know enough about it. If you give these like ever so slight little peeks, it gives people enough information to engage them more, and want that, then they'll want to know more, right? You can catch up with them. You can share your journey, right? The journey that you're going through right now is probably of more value to more people than the specific topic you're talking about. Once again, 81% of people out there have write a book on their to-do list. But there's a big drop-off between the people that have it on their list and the people that actually do it. So sharing your journey to either inform, inspire, entertain, that type of content immediately feels personal without a ton of work. Your journey is personal to you, and you sharing it may in some capacity feel like, yes, oh man, this person's being vulnerable on their social media. And that really just facilitates a very personal connection pretty quickly. And then we would make the ask. My encouraged me to start a list of people, provide feedback, on my draft or on this particular, is it okay that I reach out and keep you updated? And it doesn't even have to be, anything, let's say like the writing manuscript related. I'm writing about this particular industry. I always appreciate being connected to others in this industry who can help inform, keep me up to date on things that are happening in this industry. Can I count you in as someone who I can rely on to bring me, up to the minute news on our industry or on this topic? And that's where we're going to build our email list from. That's where we're going to ask them for kind of their information. Can I have your email? Can I have, your group, your LinkedIn group, can I depend on you guys? Or, we want to get information from them so that we can begin to build out these other forms of digital communication. So once again, it may start as you liking someone's LinkedIn post and leaving a comment. Gee, I love the part where you said, but we're always trying to mature these relationships too, and bring in other digital avenues of communication to create personalized feelings. And then these are great tools for audience engagement at this stage. You'll see in the spreadsheet, there's the 5-minute favor. The 5-minute favor is a concept that is discussed by organizational psychologist Adam Grant in his book, Give and Take. We've linked it here for you to be able to see. And it really is a small way to add large value to other people's lives, and then, subsequently your own, where you perform a 5-minute favor. It's very targeted. You've got, this isn't a lot of time, so you kind of into it with a strategy. So here's some videos on the 5-minute favor, and why we feel it's a thing that can be employed to really, really help you feel and be successful in this audience engagement. And the kind of overall strategy is where you identify a particular member of your audience, you connect or follow on their social media, maybe once again, you leave a comment, but you perform a small favor. And it doesn't have to be anything huge, it should be 5 minutes or less for you to start to finish, complete this favor. You can write a review of their book, share, maybe they have a podcast, new episode this week, share it on your social, comment on a post, make an introduction between them and someone else in your network that could be of value to them. But the idea is these are, granted small favors and they don't take a lot of time, but in the big picture, they may add a lot of value. And that's, once again, if we do that first and if we do that up front, then when we have an ask for a favor from our audience later on in the conversation, they'll remember, let's say how giving you were in the very beginning. And it's gonna feel more natural, like, oh yeah, we kind of do have a relationship that was built on, you doing a favor for me. So now, sure, let me do a favor for you. And it does feel more organic. It doesn't feel as salesy when you do ask about time, talent, or treasure. Like, what can I depend on you for? Can I depend on your time? Can I depend on your talent? Or are you actually going to make a purchase? Those asks, those call to actions feel far more natural when they're part of, a longer, engaged type of conversations. Fan interaction templates. How do we interact? And first and foremost, the biggest step is ask people about themselves first. I think everybody, likes to, there's really not many people who would say, I don't like to talk about myself. And even if they don't like to talk about, once again, this doesn't have to be about their personal lives. They may want to talk about their job. They may want to talk about a new promotion they just got. They may want to talk about, something professionally that they have that they're really proud of. We always want to ask about them first, and then kind of maybe have some of these little follow-ups afterwards. And once again, these can happen. These don't have to be like comments on posts. These can be what direct message conversations are like. These can be what email conversations are like. But here's just some good jumping off points to get that really personalized conversation flowing fairly naturally. Turning backers into fans, once again, and it's, like I said, it's the idea of the funnel. The backers are at the top because most likely we have the largest amount of backers as opposed to fans or super fans. So this is going to give you a little bit of the idea behind what we can do to shift someone from being a backer to being more invested in being a fan. And a lot of the times, personalizing our outreach, maybe we're making a phone call to them. This is kind of the Hamilton hierarchy of where, what we see communication looking like. And the idea is we're taking this from Alexander Hamilton, who, ended up being the author of the United States Constitution. How did he get that backing and that support to be able to get this document out there and now have it hundreds of years later still valued as high as it is? And that this tells a little bit about the journey that he took to kind of curate his audience in a way that was going to benefit his publication of this document. Organize your network by personality. And once again, this is kind of what type of content is going to appeal most to various aspects of your audience. We've got the gut, which is a lot of times entertainment. So something maybe humorous, anecdotal. We've got the head audience, which is the thinkers. These people tend to think about planning, about the future. So they want to hear content that is more logical in nature, where our heart people really love to hear about feelings, emotions, nostalgia, memories, your dreams. I'm sure you've got all three aspects of this to like your big picture goal when you're done. I'm sure there's a gut part that it's like, you know, I want to walk away, you know, feeling as though I've taken, you know, this anecdotally away from this experience. Head, this is logically what I'm going through. This is the, you know, I want to hit this number of dollar sales. I want to hit this number of copies sold. I want to hit this number of, you know, number of packages I'm offering and how many I sell of each. And then the heart content is, well, what does it feel like to be going through this process? What does it feel like to have those goals? What's it going to feel like when you achieve them? So this is kind of the ways we break down audiences to say, well, what type of content should we give? You know, maybe you've got your email list broken down well enough that you know who your gut, your head, and your heart people are, and you are now going to segment your audience. And granted, you may be sharing the same article, but let's say the intro that you're writing into the article is a bit different for each of those audiences. So it feels more personalized and it feels more in alignment with their tastes and what it is they are seeking from content that they engage with. And we break that down: feelers, thinkers, laughers, and then a sequence of communications and engagements for each personality type. You know, once again, as I've said, we can segment our audience and then perhaps speak to them in a way that feels more personalized because we're speaking their language. And that's what we want you to do here is look at, who do you think is going to like an inspiration story? Who do you think is going to like to hear about research? Your feelers, your thinkers, or your laughers? Okay, now that we kind of have this broken down, we know our feelers definitely want to hear about our inspiration. Let's think of some inspiring content to give to them. And then you can always add more and you can add, the names of the various people. But the idea is that we're segmenting our audience in the way that makes it easier for us to give relevant content to perhaps a larger portion of audience after we've done these one-on-one communications. Socialize elements of create a personal feeling through social media. So here's, a real quick kind of breakdown of how to build a fan base, basic post templates, and an example here. And then here it kind of breaks down, what do we mean by a hook? What do we mean by, here's the hook of the book. What is the body? What is the call to action? What hashtags are you using? And then do you have a media file? So these are kind of a checklist if you want to make posts about each of these topics. If you want to make a post about the problem that you are trying to solve in writing your book, well, what is the hook? What is that opening sentence or closing sentence that you're going to use to draw the audience in, right? And then what's the body? What are you actually going to say in the post? What is the call to action going to be for your audience? What hashtags are you using? Once again, I really would advocate for no more than 4 at max for hashtags. And then media file. I am always going to recommend a media file. And that can be a photo, that can be a video, that can be a graphic that you've created. This post that we were looking at up here is primarily graphics. Granted, there may be a photo of the book cover, but this is primarily graphic in nature. I would always recommend including some kind of visual simply because people take in information in very different ways. Visual information is taken in, oh my goodness, the astronomical values at how much quicker visual information is taken in than reading. It's a really shocking statistic. So we always want to present something visual because humans just kind of naturally take in visual information quicker and more efficiently than reading. But we do also want to present something for them to read as well, because that's where the information is. Session 3, real quick, before I dive into that, are there any questions or comments on what we've discussed thus far about engaging with our audiences? All right, everybody seems good. So yeah,
I
that
do
would
have a
be,
question.
go ahead. Yes, Hatem.
Yeah. Hi, Nikki. It seems like I have deserted the other sprints, but I've had a crazy February. So every time I wanted to attend it and I couldn't. So my
It's okay.
question to Mariana is, um, I have a bit of a hang up with like making lists, and I can make lists, I can write lists. I can come up in half hour with 400 people that could be in those super fans, backers. But I struggle then how to turn that handwritten list or thought up list that comes from WhatsApp, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. I have like 300 people on Zoho on my CRM. How do I tactically, how do I take all that information into a list? I mean, to enter those people into the list that you have would take me 2 days, and I don't have 2 days right now. So what are tricks of the trade about capturing, taking it, how do I pull it from WhatsApp or my contacts, or from I have an Excel, that's easy, or from all these sources. I have somebody helping me, and she takes all my business cards and attendees that I meet at conferences and adds them up. That's how I get to 350 or so on Zoho. But just pulling it all together is a daunting task for me. The good news is
So
I have that information. The difficulty for me is how do I bring it all together?
first and foremost, it sounds like you've already started with the conferences, and that's something the practice that you have is kind of in marketing what we see as the standard. You collect business cards, then when you get back, you compile those into a list based on, and a lot of times we include absolutely emails, phone numbers that are on the card, but if there's anything also anecdotal, if you remember conversations that you've had one-on-one with someone, also get those notes into that spreadsheet as well.
Yeah,
And yes,
I'm blessed that I can like create a meta file in my head where when I see the card or the person, I can remember one or two
not on the
stories.
card. Yeah, you can also write
Oh
down.
no, even in my head. So the question is, how do I go? Like I'm gonna need to at some point give the information to Stephanie McKibbins, but I'm scared of that effort that I need to put for it to go from my head and from different parts in my world into a single list.
Well, once again, you're doing the right thing with the trade shows, but there's other places you can be pulling information from. On LinkedIn, you can export spreadsheets of emails that are either following you or in some capacity you've engaged with. You can export those email as a email spreadsheet. That should list basic information about the person, maybe the name that they use on LinkedIn, their email address. There's ways that you can export those lists from certain social media account platforms. And then once again, the idea is you compile a large list of people to either email or update or what have you, but then we segment it. So maybe people who you met at trade shows get a certain type of content, right? Whereas people who you're pulling off LinkedIn get content that focuses more on something else. And I think the phrase that you've said that stuck out to me most is I'm a bit intimidated by the work that I would have to put in. The problem is it does take work. There's nothing I can tell you that push this button and the process will be done. This takes work, but the idea is what you are investing in it, you will see a return on your investment with. If you put the work into this, you are going to see it pay dividends when you are asking people to pay. But that does take time, and it does take effort. And there's nothing I can give you, no tools.
Thank you.
Even if I, bought HubSpot for you and offered it, it's still
No, even I have Zoho One, and it took me help from someone to put all that information in. It was like 10 hours of someone's work. So, I was just asking in case there wasn't something obvious in AI today that could kind of scour your information and bring it all in one place. There is one of the Zoho, I think it's called Zoho Social or something, Zoho Media, that may be able to help there. But yeah, the LinkedIn export of emails, that's going to be very helpful with like something like 6,000 followers and 3,900 connections. That should all be, and then I can sort through that by, yeah.
But once again, you want it to feel personal. So even with large followings, especially with large followings, you do need to personalize it, because if you just decide to mitigate the process and put the call to action out there when your pre-sale is about to launch, you may have 39,000 followers or connections, 29,999 other people. They're going to, the one person's going to look at that and say, well, he's got such a large following, everyone else is going to go by. I don't need to. So you still need to personalize it. And that takes creating that database and kind of looking at perhaps once the database is created, it's going to show you where it's going to be most valuable for you to put in your time and effort. Because there is a return on the investment, but that means time and effort wise, there does have to be an initial investment made by us to do so.
Got it.
Does that make sense? And yeah, there's really no way to you can shorten
it makes sense.
Perhaps
it makes sense. I'm just gonna keep looking for ways to do it, and if I do, I'll let you know.
Yeah. And there may be some AI way to do it, but once again, it's machines. Like they're going to make mistakes. They're not perfect. And there may be context that they miss. So I don't know that I've come across anything that can do that effectively enough that I would trust it to do so. But yeah, that would be my response for that. I wish there was a magic thing I could say, but yeah, that's so we do have still session 3 to go into, and there's a lot of valuable information there. I don't think we're going to be able to do that today. We're bumping up on 1 p.m. EST. Identifying your author persona. I just cannot tell you how important this is, because once you have really thought about what you want to project or who you want to be as an author, I am a physician. I'm a doctor of XYZ. I'm an alum of XYZ University. I'm an expert. I'm a SME on XYZ. I am a parent. I'm a horror movie fan. Like none of those actually are about me, but once you kind of hone in on those and define yourself, it may become very easy to say, well, if my book is about this and this is who I am as an author, this is where I should be focusing time and effort. So there is a great deal of value. I would love it if you guys could go over session 3 on your own. There are tools in here to help you perhaps with the process of identifying who you are as an author and then understanding what that needs to look like when it comes to audience connections. The 3x3 audience connection kind of activity or tool here should help you out with that. And then crafting your book announcement, because once again, once we've identified, let's see what the title of the book is, what the book's going to be about, who I am as an author, now let's craft the book announcement and kind of decide where it would be best to put that, or if I make a small revision and I can put it on both LinkedIn and then on Facebook and then on, so we have some templates in here to help you with crafting that particular announcement. We've got some ideas for visuals to go with it. However, obviously we do not have the time to go through all of this today. So please go through session 3 on your own, and please I really, really can't advocate enough. Do the activities, use the tools, because it is going to, once again, you guys are pouring a ton of content into these books. So let us help you with the content we want you to build around the book. But never take these templates as hard and fast. We want you to use them and maneuver them and perhaps revise them to fit your audience persona, your author persona, your book topic, and all that good stuff. And that is our time for today. Any questions real quick before we jump off?
I have a quick one.
No, and I have to jump.
Oh,
Thanks.
go. Okay,
Thank
okay,
you.
thanks.
See you next week, Nikki. Thank you.
So you said
Yeah.
go through session 3. Isn't that what we're gonna go through next week, or did I miss it?
Today is session 3. So
Hmm.
what happened was during session 1, we discussed the majority of session 1 in the workbook, which I'll share my screen real quick and show you what it is specifically I'm referring to. So in the workbook, we have it broken down by sessions. Session 1 was about modern author fan theory. And there's a big part of that section that talks about social media. I made that social media 101. That was completely what we talked about in session 2 last week. So we now have, today is technically session 3. So I went in and covered what session 2 was supposed to be about, but also there is session 3 that I would like you guys to read on your own, strictly because I would like us to be on, next week is session 4. I would like us to be on the session 4 materials by that point.
Mhm.
So I would just like you to go through session 3 on your own for this week. And next week will technically be session 4. And I would like us to kick off on session 4 next week in the workbook as well.
So today, even though it should have been session 3, we covered mostly session 2 work material.
Yes. Now, the reason I did that is because session 3 is about your author personality, your author persona. And as much as I can tell you where to begin that journey, that's your journey. That's who you want to be as an author or who you are. So I really want that to be personal, and I want that to be something that is intentional, and that you do put kind of time and thought into getting on paper. Because the idea is that may really show you Facebook groups, LinkedIn groups, where your efforts would be best focused, because you're going to be connecting with accounts or groups or people who would be in alignment with that author persona. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah,
So
kind of. But when I met with Eric the first time, I explained to him that I'm writing this book. It's called "Become Who You Are Meant to Be." I'm writing it for credibility, to show that I'm a thought leader.
yes.
And then to facilitate, TED and customers and potentially, pull out different content for explaining away in material on social media.
Yes.
So what kind of an author does that make me?
That's your journey. That's for you to, I can't tell you what that means. The author persona is about what that means to you, not what that means to me.
I know. What I meant is I'm doing it just for credibility.
Credibility is what?
Meaning, when I introduce myself and I'm trying to sell services, I wrote a book and I'm
A subject matter expert at what,
subject
though?
matter expert in this. Oh, at what? Oh, at a few subjects. The intention statement is doing what you are meant to do is not as hard as we believe. That's the tension statement. And some of the sub expertise are in finding what your calling is through understanding the signposts. That's one. Another one is shaping your purpose from that and finding that activity that turns you on and that puts you in flow. Those are two of the big ones. but that's the book that I decided to write. But I have expertise in many other things. So my professional persona